was never one for big vacations, but after my promotion, I decided to treat myself. A solo cruise sounded like the perfect way to disconnect. A week on the open sea, no emails, no responsibilities, just me. When I checked in, the woman at the front desk gave me a friendly smile, but it faltered when she saw my cabin assignment. Cabin 6B, she repeated, her voice a bit tighter than before. She handed me the key card, but it felt more like a dismissal than a welcome. I brushed it off. It was probably nothing. The ship was impressive, huge, with gleaming floors and a polished atrium. I spent the first day lounging by the pool and getting acquainted with the ship. Everything felt calm, exactly what I needed. But when I finally made it to my cabin, something felt strange. Cabin 6B was tucked away at the end of a quiet, dim hallway. The lights flickered as I entered, but I didn't think much of it. The room was clean, though it had an odd, almost musty smell, like it hadn't been used in a while. The bed was neatly made, but the sheets felt damp, probably just from the humidity. That night I heard it, a soft, faint sobbing. It sounded like it was coming from the walls, distant but unmistakable. I leaned closer, listening. It was strange, like someone was quietly crying in the cabin next to mine. I told myself it was just the noise of the ship. Maybe it was the pipes or the wind. But when it happened again the following night, it made me uneasy. The sound wasn't getting any quieter. In fact, it seemed to get louder, more desperate. The next morning I mentioned it to a steward. He looked at me with an odd expression. "There's no cabin above yours. The deck above is closed off," he said, his voice flat. "Maybe you were hearing something from one of the other rooms." I wanted to brush it off, but something about his tone bothered me. I had been hearing it at the same time every night. Someone crying, someone desperate. The walls felt thin, and the noise kept me up. Then one morning, I woke up to find the floor of my cabin damp. It wasn't much, just a small patch in the middle of the room, but it was enough to make me feel uneasy. I checked the bathroom, but nothing was leaking. I was certain the carpet hadn't been wet when I came in. I went back to the front desk, asking if there was another room available. The woman at the counter seemed caught off guard, glancing at her screen. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice stiff. "We're fully booked for the next few days. We can have someone come check your room if you like." I hesitated but declined. Something about her response didn't sit right with me. Why was it so hard to get a room change? That night the crying came again, but this time it wasn't just the sound of sobbing. I heard something else, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone was gently knocking on my door, and I didn't move. The knocks continued for a while, slow and deliberate. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. When they stopped, I convinced myself it was just my imagination, or maybe someone on the ship having a rough time. The walls were thin, after all. In the morning, I found that the carpet outside my cabin had been soaked through, not just a small patch. It was wet, as though someone had spilled something all over it. I couldn't understand how it had happened, but I felt an overwhelming sense of discomfort. When I finally left the ship at the next port, I didn't look back. I didn't want to know what had happened in that cabin or what was really going on. But I knew one thing for sure. There was something deeply wrong with that place. I never got the full story. I don't know what caused the crying or why the cabin had that strange dampness to it. But if you ever find yourself on a cruise and they offer you Cabin 6B, take a moment. Think twice before you stay. I booked the cruise to get away from everything. Work, stress, people, noise. I wanted to be alone. 3 days in, it was working. I spent most of my time lounging on the balcony, eating too much, and finally getting full nights of sleep. Then came that night. I woke up to a voice over the cabin speaker, flat and robotic. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Midnight Buffet is now open on Deck 13. All are welcome." I sat up groggily, blinking at the digital clock. 3:33 a.m. That didn't make sense. There weren't any events scheduled that late, and Deck 13? I was almost sure cruise ships skip that number, like how some buildings don't have a 13th floor. But maybe I was wrong. Still, something about the announcement tugged at me. I hadn't eaten since dinner, and the thought of a quiet, empty buffet sounded kinda perfect. So, I got dressed and followed the corridor. Oddly, no one else seemed to be out. The ship was silent. No late-night music from the lounge, no footsteps, no crew. But taped to the walls were little signs printed in plain black letters on white paper. Midnight Buffet. They led me to a staircase I didn't recognize. Narrow, industrial-looking, like staff access. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. The stairwell led to a cold, metallic hallway. At the end was a thick steel door, slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Inside was a dining room, dimly lit, no windows, and nothing like the bright buffets upstairs. The food was laid out across long folding tables. Meats, fruits, breads, all lukewarm. The crowd was small, maybe a dozen people, all of them eating in complete silence. Something felt off. None of them looked at me. No one smiled or acknowledged me walking in. A woman sat at the end of the table chewing slowly, her eyes glassy. A man next to her was cutting into something rubbery and gray, staring straight ahead. The only sound was the clink of utensils and the wet smacks of chewing. I walked to the nearest tray and picked up a plate. Everything looked edible, but nothing smelled right. It was like food that had been sitting out for hours. Technically fine, but not fresh. A man in a white uniform stood near the wall, watching. I assumed he was staff, but his name tag was missing, and he wasn't moving, just staring. I asked him, "What is this exactly? Was this on the itinerary?" He didn't answer. He just tilted his head slightly. That was enough for me. I set the plate down and walked back toward the door. It was still there, thank God. I left quietly, climbed back up the stairs, and made my way to the front desk to ask what the hell was going on. The woman at the counter frowned when I mentioned Deck 13. "There is no Deck 13, she said, "and we don't do any midnight buffets, not during off-season." I asked her if maybe it was a private event or something the staff had set up unofficially. She just shook her head, typed something into her computer, and said, "There's no record of any dining activity after 11 p.m. tonight." I didn't sleep much after that. The next day, I tried to find that stairwell again, walked every hallway I could, but it was gone. I never thought a vacation could break me, but after what happened on that cruise, I don't think I'll ever set foot on a ship again. It started as a dream trip. My boyfriend Jordan and I found a crazy deal for a week-long Caribbean cruise on the Isadora Sun. It was one of those massive liners with rooftop pools, endless buffets, and a mini shopping mall inside. We figured it would be a perfect escape from work and stress. The first 2 days were everything we hoped for: sun, drinks, and no responsibilities. Then, on the third night, a storm hit. It wasn't the worst weather I'd ever seen, but the lightning was intense, and the ship rocked hard enough to knock over furniture. We assumed everything would go back to normal by morning. When we woke up, we were stopped in the middle of the ocean. No land in sight, no announcements, no explanation. The crew said we'd hit a mechanical issue and needed to wait for a tow. That seemed reasonable, until the second day of drifting. And the third, the captain went silent. No updates, The crew gave vague answers or avoided questions altogether. We couldn't reach anyone by phone, and the ship's Wi-Fi and satellite systems stopped working after the storm. No news, no contact with the outside world. Just us, floating. The food situation got tense fast. The buffet shut down, then the smaller cafes. They started handing out small boxed meals and bottled water, but even that started to run low. People got angry. One guy tried to force his way into the kitchen and got tackled by security. A woman had a breakdown on deck screaming that we'd been abandoned. The worst part? No one could prove she was wrong. At night, I heard arguments through the cabin walls. Fights. Someone kicked down a cabin door 2 floors below us. Then the rumors started. Someone fell overboard or jumped. No one could confirm it. The elevators stopped working, the lights flickered. Crew members were visibly exhausted. Some looked like they hadn't slept in days. One guy we'd seen leading dance classes on the first day was now sweeping decks with a glazed-over expression. By day 6, the air smelled stale and metallic. The plumbing wasn't working right. People were getting sick. Jordan and I stopped using the shared dining areas altogether. We stayed in our cabin with granola bars and rationed bottled water, just waiting for a rescue that never came. It was like the ship had just fallen off the map. Then one night I woke up and Jordan was gone. I found him 2 decks down, sitting in a stairwell, staring into space. He said he just needed air, but there was no air down there. He just shut down. That was the moment I realized, no one's coming. This ship wasn't just broken down, something else was going on, something the cruise line didn't want getting out. Maybe they were avoiding lawsuits, maybe they were trying to hide that we'd veered way off course, maybe there was no help coming at all. By some miracle, we were spotted by a passing cargo vessel 2 days later. It had picked up our emergency beacon, a signal the Isadora Sun crew never told us had even been sent. We were rescued after 10 days adrift. 10 days with no plan, no leadership, no communication. 10 days that felt like a slow psychological collapse. When we got back to the mainland, the cruise company downplayed everything. Unexpected mechanical failure, they said. Minimal disruption. Most of the passengers signed NDAs in exchange for refunds and hush money. I still dream about those endless silent days on the water, the way the crew avoided eye contact, the way the horizon stretched out in every direction with no help in sight, the way we were left to figure it out on our own. Because the truth is, it doesn't take ghosts or sea monsters to destroy you. Sometimes all it takes is being forgotten.